Welcome to Health Oddity, the show that strips away the jargon and hype surrounding all things health and fitness to help you live a long, strong and energetic life. Lining up at the bar this week, here's Peter Ladd and James St. Pierre.
Hello and welcome to the Health Oddity podcast, episode 261. And this is the first episode in our 6th year of weekly podcasts. So this is the first episode in our 6th year of weekly podcasts. And if you're listening on the day of release, it is the 29th of August, 2025. And we are joined by a returning guest. And I have to say, when this guest was on last time, he was on, the guest is, we'll just quickly say hello to him now, Mr. David Amerland. How are you doing, David?
I'm really, really good. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Last time it was brilliant.
Excellent. And it's great. And I was just going to say, last time you were on it wasn't that long ago, but it was episode 243. That was back in April. So it's about 5 months ago. And the podcast was called Built to Last. And that is the name of David's most recent book. So, and we talked all about the importance of making a personal, visceral, mental, emotional connection to exercise and movement. And we're going to talk about some stuff related to that today, but obviously slightly different as well. So I would say, if you didn't listen to that episode, either go back and listen to it now, episode 243, or listen to this one now. And if you like what you hear, which I'm sure you will, go back and listen to that one. I have to say, David, that there was a client of mine called Mr. Paul Field, who is a friend of the show. He listens every single week. And after listening to that podcast, he thought it was absolutely brilliant. And he shared it in a kind of a business group that he's part of. And he also went on, I think he connected with you on LinkedIn, but he went to find that book that you'd written about the sort of the sniper book. And the sniper mind, and he went and he had to buy one. I think it was out of print, or he couldn't find one. He bought one secondhand from America, and he tracked the book down, and he's been reading it and absolutely loves it. So yeah, I think you made a really positive impression on quite a few people last time you were on. So yeah, I mean,
thank you very much for saying
yeah.
that. Like, always, it's a function of and this is no joke, it's a function of the hosts, because essentially, there's this synergy. If the questions sync with what I have to say, and then what comes afterwards, amazing things happen, literally. And when it doesn't, it just falls flat. So, kudos to you guys.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I will just say, it's funny because Pete and we haven't actually recorded a podcast for about a month, have we, Pete, together?
I've forgotten what to do.
Because we've continued to release one every week, but we kind of we recorded quite a few before our holidays. And I've been away for 2 weeks. Pete's been away for 2 weeks. We've been in Scotland together for the Donald Dinny Day, which was amazing, which we'll talk about maybe on another episode. But yeah, good to see you, Pete, as well, because it's the first time we've done what we've...
well, thanks. I am here, everybody. If you're not watching.
Excellent. So, David, I mean, yeah, you are like I say, your last podcast with us was really thought-provoking and really inspiring and very different to many of the podcasts that we have. And like I say, it did make a really good impression on a number of people who were really, really positive about the podcast. So it's great to have you back with us again. And just before we started recording, you were going to I kind of laid out, some ideas potentially of the way we may go with this, but you were going to tell us about I know you've been doing lots of podcasts recently, and I see them coming up all the time on social media. And I think you were going to say that through having all these conversations, it almost helps, I don't know, solidify your own thoughts or take your thoughts in different directions. Or do you want to kind of explain kind of what's been going on since we last spoke kind of 5 months ago, really?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for that. Well, every time there's a conversation, even if it's about the exact same subject, the person who does the questioning brings their own perspective, their own knowledge and ideas, and that kind of sparks off to the way I've sort of been looking at things and the research that's been coming up. So it's an evolutionary process, if you like, where my own thinking and my own sort of distillation of everything that's coming out is taking me down to sort of some very basic fundamental elements, which I think bear directly upon the audience right now. And one of the things I've been looking at is, what is it exactly that's holding us back. I mean, we all train, or once we start training, we go on diets, we go on specific nutrient-specific diets, if you like. We try for muscle growth, and we know from all these things that they have a shelf life. You know, whatever training regime you apply, you need to either change it or step it up or take it down. If you are on a specific diet, that also seems to work only for a little while. And one of the things which I'll be looking at is the limiting factors of the human body as it works as a system. And the limiting factor here always is the body's focus on energy management. And I'll explain this now. Essentially, everything which we do, if we pick up a new exercise, we're going to burn energy. If we do anything which is physical in any way or mental, is going to burn energy. And the body and the brain are really, really hardwired to minimize our energy expenditure. And not just minimize it, but actually conserve it. So if you're picking up a heavy weight for the first time, and your friend has been doing it for, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 months, you're both going to lift perhaps in exactly the same way if you are already trained, but your own energy expenditure during that exercise is going to be significantly higher. The brain muscle, the mind-muscle connection won't be the same, the biomechanics won't be the same, your own ability to sort of work through that exercise in the first instance in terms of how the body perceives the effort is not going to be the same. So you're doing the same number of reps and your friend does the same number of reps, you're going to burn up, 2 things are going to happen. First of all, you're going to burn more calories. And secondly, you're going to see more adaptations. And your friend will burn fewer calories and see perhaps 0 adaptations. And the reason this happens is because the body is so dialed into this energy conservation principle. So what happens as your body adapts, your body says, okay, is this a one-off or is it something which is going to be recurring? And if you are persistent, so you send a persistent signal, it says, okay, this is something which is going to be recurring. We are spending a lot of energy here. We need to dial that down. So then it allocates resources. You get stronger neurons, so your mind-muscle connection becomes better and you become stronger. You improve your technique, so the biomechanics change, so technique becomes more efficient and your muscles get stronger. But the moment you hit that adaptation, your energetic load has lessened significantly. So now you're not burning as many calories. You're not challenging your body as much. You're not reaching any kind of improvements. You're actually plateauing. And as you plateau, if you stay at that for a while, the body actually begins to dial it down. You begin to become weaker because it says, you know, what are we doing here? Why are we spending so much energy on this without really needing to? So what you need to do every time is mix it up. So you change the pace, you change the volume, you change the frequency, you change the number of reps, you change the weight. And all this comes down to that fundamental aspect of how the body actually manages energy. And the moment we understand that, it begins to make sense in everything. It begins to make sense on why a diet won't work for very long, on why our training has to be, if we're looking for performance, it has to be sports specific. So we need to basically break it down into all the different elements that go into that specific aspect of our sport, whatever that is. It could be lifting weights, it could be sprinting, it could be playing tennis, it could be playing badminton, whatever it is. So then we train for those specifics in order to get the adaptations we need that will lead to the optimization that makes us really, really good at it in terms of performance. So we get elite performers and we put sensors on them and we see 2 things. First of all, fMRI shows their brain as they go through the complex moves of their sport barely activates. It's like there's no brain activity. And then the second thing we see is that their body does it mechanically. We call it muscle memory, but essentially it's complex synthesis of biomechanics and neural connections, which allow the body to kind of run like in a groove. So then the energetic load becomes lesser. So these are the things which actually, once we realize those things, we begin to sort of focus on why things stick. Why don't we see the adaptations we want to see? Why does something become so difficult that it seems to defeat us? And that allows us to get a new perspective on our health and our fitness, especially for training without a specific goal. A lot of people these days hit the gym, they want to get fitter, the idea is there. They have some kind of mental image of what fitness looks like, but because it's not goal specific, sometimes they sort of fail to work hard enough to see results. Sometimes they mix things up too quickly, so the body doesn't know what adaptations need to take place. And sometimes they simply aren't putting in enough specific work to see the adaptations that they need, and they get discouraged. So these are the things I've been thinking about. Yeah.
That's amazing, because there's a few things there. You talk about the plateau. I actually put a post up a couple of weeks last week, because I was in Scotland walking up and down mountains, and one of them you had to walk out towards it, up a hill, along a plateau, and then finish the mountain off. And that reminds me, we've talked to Dan John about it, about the Mastery book by George Leonard, and he says, you know, if you're in the pursuit of mastery in anything, you've got to learn to love the plateau, because you will spend a lot of time there, and that's where most people give up, because you make your way to it. You're tired kind of when you get to the top, but not burnt out. And then you make your way along the plateau and you start to, you get a bit of rest and a bit of energy back and everything before you do the next peak. And you just said, like, it's like beginner's gains, isn't it? You've just said, like, in the beginning, you'll get the results very quickly, but then you start to taper off, and that's when people give up. And it's like, no, if you stay at it and you change a few parameters, like weight or density or whatever, then the next bit you can continue. So that's really interesting. Then the other thing you've just mentioned as well, and I think certainly from my perspective years ago, before I knew anything about weight training, and I looked at fitness like, I know what it looks like, so here's what you do to get to it. But like most people, and just going and working out and trying to burn as many calories as possible, and then ended up tired and frustrated, and while trying to do a stressful job as well, and all of these things, is I just think about it like riding a bike when you're a kid. It's really hard at the start. Then, you know, it goes from, like, I've done it before, through things of, like, you've got unconscious incompetence. You don't even know that you don't know that you can't ride a bike. Then you get conscious incompetence, where you're like, right, I know I can't ride this thing, but I want to be able to ride it. Then you get conscious competence, so you'll have to think about while you're riding it. And then eventually it's just something you jump on the bike and go for a ride. So the amount of energy that you expend learning how to ride the bike is massive. But then after a while, you just jump on and go down the shops or whatever, unless you're going out on like silly bike rides like the Tour de France or something. Then obviously you burn a lot of calories. But I think for some listeners who don't lift weights or like haven't got down the gym or something like that, like, putting it kind of across like that is like, anything you learn how to do new is going to expend a lot of energy in the beginning, but then when you get used to it, you need to change it up and do something more challenging. Because then hopefully that, like, kind of brings it across to someone like the layman who's just kind of like, well, no, I've been going down the gym, but everything's stalled. And it's like, yeah, because you've learned. It's now unconscious. You just go and do it without thinking. And I think that's what most people want to get to. And they're like, oh, I don't have to think about it anymore. It's like, no, you have to constantly think about it, because your body will adapt. Yeah.
Yes, I think it's even worse than that, because, and I'm so glad you brought all this up. The moment we hit a plateau, we have two choices. Those of us who want to progress obviously get frustrated, and then we sort of try different things. And from experience, we know that, you know, if you're patient enough and you push hard enough, eventually you power through it. And that's the sort of dumb way of doing it, but it works, right? And the smart way of doing it is, you know, by actually understanding that you need to actually bring things up, raise a level, give yourself recovery time, and then sort of do it like this. But let's go to the layman, where essentially they hit the plateau, they're not seeing any results. And now they think they're stuck, they don't understand why they're stuck, they're getting frustrated, they're getting demotivated. And here's the worst thing that happens. Because it's repetitive exercise, and the body's actually optimized for it, it begins to get tired in very specific muscle groups, and you begin to get some kind of adaptations, which the first instance of which is inflammation, which is the sort of instance, the only way the body has of changing. But this type of inflammation isn't necessarily leading to a higher adaptation. It's usually the result of overuse. And that leads to de-strengthening. So now they've hit a plateau. And as they're struggling with that plateau, they see a drop in their performance and they don't understand why. And it's like running 5K, for instance. Let's say you run 5K every single day, and that's all you do. For a while, you struggle, then you get better, then it becomes easier, now you're breezing it. And at some point, you begin to get aches in your knee, aches in your ankle, aches in your lower back. And you think, why? Why am I getting all these things? Well, because that's all you're doing. So that repetitive sort of load in those particular parts of the body leads to inflammation. The body's trying to adapt, but because you're doing it every day or you're doing it very frequently, the body hasn't got time to adapt because the load isn't high enough. So now in a de-strengthened state, it's been put through its paces again. And from our perspective, it's like, oh, I can't do it anymore. Why not? And you don't understand that. You feel you're failing. And you try to power through it, thinking, if I just keep on doing it like I always have, it's going to work for me. And then you get injured because you're trying to put your body through a load which now it simply cannot take because it's in that state. So, these are the things which are counterintuitive almost. We think that, if we want to get good at running, what do? We need to run. But we know from elite runners, but this is not all you have to do. You need to stretch in specific ways. You need to work on hip mobility. You need to work on your technique, which is the mind-muscle connection. You need to work on load, which means you've definitely got to do resistance training. So then you do all those things and your running improves, even though it's running and doesn't appear to have a direct connection with any of those things. So these counterintuitive truths are where a lot of people actually fall flat because they don't know them, they're not explained to them, they're hard to internalize. And instinctively, we think, oh, I just need to ignore the pain I have in my back or my ankle or my knee. It's going to go away. I'm going to run through it. Classic scenario, right, in the past. And that's wrong. And you said something else again, right? You said you doing all these things and having a stressful life, high-powered job, demanding job. And here's the thing about energy and energy expenditure and energy availability. Suppose you need, I don't know, let's take a number, 3,500 calories, which you need a day for your body to perform at that level, to repair, to grow, to get stronger. So in theory, you're taking those 3,500 calories and you're thinking, well, I'm doing what I should be doing. My nutrition is on point and my training is on point. Why am I not seeing the results I want? But there is such a thing in the body called bioavailability of energy, which essentially means that, okay, you're taking in the fuel that you should, and you have sufficient calories, sufficient nutrients, but you also have a stressful life. Your cortisol levels are elevated, so your energy pathways are not working the way they should. You're putting on more weight than you should because it goes straight into fat deposits. You are having elevated stress responses throughout the body, elevated inflammation in the brain and body. So now the bioavailability of the energy that you need to perform, to change, to repair is not there, even though technically you're doing the right thing. So this is where it gets complicated. Some things are very simple in how we operate. You say, okay, you want to get stronger, go and lift. You want to get faster, go and run. And it works, right? Until it doesn't. And when it doesn't, that's when the complex system of our nature kicks in. And a complex system is a system of nested systems, essentially, where everything affects everything else. So if we take the heart, it's a system on its own. If we take the gut, it's a system on its own. And all those systems now need to work together. So once we get past the initial phases where it's simple, it stops being simple, and now it's up to us to actually become experts on us. And there's no getting around this. Either we do that or you get a coach, right? And if you have the money and the resources to get a coach, beautiful. He'll guide you through everything. He'll do his best to understand how you operate and take care of you. But if you don't, and even if you do have a coach, he's not there 24/7, but you are in your body. So we have proprioception, right? Which is how our body works in 3D space. I know where my hands are, I know where the mouse is in front of me. I can reach for it with my eyes shut pretty much. That's proprioception. But we also have interoception, which is how we interrogate our own body. We know the flutter in our heart, the tightening in our chest, the butterflies in our stomach. We know all those things. And if we know them, then we should also know what they mean. We should also know how to operate with them so that actually we diffuse them where necessary and use them when we need to use them. So these are the complexities which trip us up. We go into the gym, we think, great, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and for sure it works. And then when it stops working, we basically stop because we think, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I don't know, maybe it's me. Maybe I can't do it. Maybe I should be doing something else. And it's none of those things. It's basically understanding ourselves to such a degree that we can navigate that now complex landscape that's unfolding in front of us because we've gone to the next level.
Do you think that there was, I think is it Dr. Herman Ponce or who did a lot of studies on like energy conservation and energy within, these kind of hunter-gatherer tribes and that kind of thing. And they've
Yes.
sort of found out that if you were, like people who exercise a lot, they try and exercise a lot, but the body will then kind of down regulate maybe their fidgeting and their normal daily movements, because you actually, even if you're expending more exercise an hour, more energy and exercising 1 hour a day, your body somehow kind of recalibrates itself to reserve energy the rest of the time. So like you say, you think it's a complex system, where it's not very, that, and when people in these traditional hunter-gatherer tribes and things will go out hunting, and maybe they'll have a very, very energetic day one day, once they've actually got the food, the next day they'll just spend just sitting around doing nothing really, because they're conserving energy. They're not there trying to do the opposite, I suppose, of what most people in modern civilized society, kind of technologically advanced society, are doing. They're actually trying to reserve energy for survival purposes, rather than store it because we're kind of overfed and all the rest of it. It is fascinating, isn't it? I mean, do you think that, I mean, one thing that you did, tying this back to the conversation we had on the first podcast, where you said people go to a gym and they just do a little bit of everything, and they're not really sure what they're trying to do. So the body doesn't really know what kind of adaptations to make. And maybe there's no, because obviously you don't want things to be the same all the time, because obviously we're just in a plateau, and then we'll eventually start to go downwards, to decrease our abilities. But if things are so random and chaotic that there's no pattern, rhyme, or reason to what we're doing, then we've got no way of tracking or measuring progress. So do we really need, initially, or not initially, because I suppose getting moving is in its own right is the first thing we need to do, but to have some kind of goal, or to have some kind of framework, or to have some kind of idea of what we're trying to achieve? Because without that, we are just doing random acts of chaos, and there's not really any testing, measuring, or, I mean, how does that tie in?
Okay, that's okay. Thank you so much for bringing this up. And you said a lot of things I'd like to unpack here. And let's start with the initial thing about the hunter-gatherers, because we've got new research on this, right? We looked at the Hamza, and I hope I'm pronouncing this right now, Hamza tribe in Tanzania, which a hunter-gathering tribe. They walk on average every day 19,000 steps. So they're pretty lean because their diet is not rich in fat and sugar, as you'd expect. And they're pretty healthy. And yes, when they don't have to do things, they do nothing, and they conserve energy because that's what we're hardwired to do. But here's the fascinating thing about this. Their metabolism is the same per pound as a sedentary person in the West sitting in front of a laptop. Because they're the same biomechanical unit, driven by the same rules for survival and conservation of energy, that person is. They haven't changed despite the setting. So we take them and they're active, and for sure they're burning up energy, and they have adaptations which allow them to conserve that energy. But in the course of their day, they will burn roughly the same amount of calories that the person sitting in front of their laptop will also burn. So you think, okay, if their metabolic rate is the same, their metabolism works the same way, why is one person overweight, and why are they so lean and fit? And the difference here comes in the caloric density of the food they consume. So, they consume food which is not calorifically dense, so they have to consume quite a lot, and there's a variety of food they have to take. And the person sitting from the laptop reaches, for the phone and gets a takeout, and there's 2,000-3,000 calories coming in without any effort at all. And that's easy to digest food. And that's the primary difference. So now we get back to what you said about, how do we need a goal when we train? If we move our body, and that's the primary starting point, for sure we're expanding energy. And the moment we expand energy, a whole lot of adaptations will take place in our body and brain, because that's the point. Once we become a little bit good at this, then we definitely need a goal. And that goal has to be personal, leading back to our first podcast. It has to be something which is specific to us. It can't be your coach saying, hey, you know what? I think it's time for you to grow bigger muscles. If you don't want bigger muscles, you don't want that. It means nothing to you. You think, oh yeah, sure, I'll try and do it, but your heart is not in it. And we know now from studies that if you're not mindful in what you're doing the same exercise, somebody who actually is putting in their heart and soul into and their concentration gives us anywhere between 5 and 20% fewer, less sort of response in the body than the person who's actually minding it, which is crazy, right? So if you're into it, if you want bigger biceps, you're lifting the same weight, I'm lifting the same weight as you. I'm thinking, I'm a runner, I don't want to have big biceps. So I'm kind of, going through in a sort of blind road. We finished the workout, we've done the same number of reps, more or less the same quality in our lifting. You're going to see between 5 and 20% better response from your body than I am. And you think, how is that possible? Well, my brain is telling me, okay, I'm doing this, I'm burning energy, but that's all I'm doing. You're thinking to yourself, I really need these big biceps because I have this image of myself, which is definitely required to have them. So that's where the goals come in, and that's where they have to be personal. And obviously, if they're personal, they also allow us to do the thing which is key to our progress, to measure it, to see how do we basically progress. What is it that we need to do? And when we get stuck, what is it that we got stuck on? So if we don't have that personal goal, which has to be personal for everybody, then we're not able to progress, and then we get demotivated. And I mentioned motivation and demotivation a few times now. And of course, in the course of my podcasts, I've also come to sort of insights of my own on this. And we know from the neuroscientific point of view that motivation is a certain number of neurochemicals in the brain, which reach a certain threshold that make you feel bad. And the moment they make you feel bad, you take action and you go to a place where it's good. That's motivation from a neuroscientific point of view, neurochemically speaking. And then we talk about willpower and discipline. And these are just constructs, these are words. And what I say to this is that basically willpower is knowing what to do, having the plan. So if I have the plan, then I'll do it, right? Because that's my willpower. Then I can actually do it. If I don't know what to do each time, if I have to make it up, it's so difficult, especially on a bad day when I'm stressed, when I'm tired, when I'm cold, because the weather's bad outside. Then I have to climb that mountain before I even start training. So if it's there, that's my willpower. Now, what's my discipline? Discipline is a structure put around this, which makes it possible to execute my plan day in, day out. That's my discipline. And I happen to be listening. I don't know if you caught the. I'm not a huge boxing fan because boxing is a brutal sport. At the same time, it's a hugely strategic sport, especially at the high level. I caught the post-fight interview between Usyk Dubois. And Usyk was explaining, he was asked about motivation. And he said something which blew my mind because essentially this is what I've explained in previous podcasts. He said, motivation is nothing. He said, you wake up one day a little bit earlier than before and you don't have the motivation. And I thought that's right because your neurochemistry is different. So what you have, however, he said, is your plan and you have your team and you show up and do the work. And I thought that's it. That's the plan and that's the structure. So from his perspective, he's absolutely right. Sure, he's highly motivated because, a number of reasons. But at the same time, there are days when he wakes up and there's zero motivation to do anything. But he knows what he has to do that day. He knows what he has to execute. And because he knows that, and there's all these people around him, his team, whose job is to make sure he actually does it. And I thought that's brilliant. That's exactly right. So when we talk about willpower and discipline at a layman's level, sure, you're motivated at Christmas to get fit because you're relaxed, you're well fed, you're warm, you're inside, you're thinking about the future from a very rosy place. And then come January, the weather's really bad. Life begins to get hard because, we have to rush everywhere and stress begins to accumulate. And then our motivation goes. But if we have actually a plan, what to do each day or what to do on specific days of the week, and we have made it easy by getting access to what we need. If the gym, we need to get our stuff together. We need to sort of calculate the time and make it easy to get there. And then also we have a structure around that. Maybe we'll go with a friend. Maybe it's a social element attached to this. Maybe it's a hard commitment we made to a personal trainer. Any of those things is structure. So if we have the plan and the structure in place, well, there's your willpower, there's your discipline. It's difficult to break that because then you're failing yourself at a very indisputable level. So
I remember
all those things you said.
Yeah, we had Mark Rifkind on, and one of the things he said, that one of his sayings was, is it motivation is for amateurs, discipline is for professionals. Like, and he sort of said, it's not. And he said, when you wake up in the morning, don't ask yourself if you feel like training today. He goes, when you wake up in the morning, you mustn't say, do I feel like training today? It's irrelevant if you feel like training. You have to get up. It's like you say, you get up and you follow the plan. You get up and you do. But all this stuff is it's easy to say. And it's not, but I know that even for myself, and I know that for yourself, David, as well, because you're a human being, and so's Pete. We all must have days where even though you've got a plan, even though you've got a goal, even though there's a structure in place, and even though you know what you need to do, there's some days that it's harder than others to do, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And this is hard now. This is where the emotional connection has to come in. Now, I don't know if you caught any of the interviews given by, and my brain's gone blank now, that guy who does those ultra marathons, Navy SEAL.
Oh, Goggins, is it David Goggins?
Yes, thank you, David Goggins.
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah.
Okay. And he's very transparent about his own motivation. He absolutely hates the way he was before he did all this. He really does, viscerally. So to him, it's anathema to return to that. And he says, do I get up and want to run? No. My knees hurt and my back hurts and I'm cursing. And he's talking about ultra marathons. He goes, 75 miles in, however, it kicks in. And he's been running for 75 miles now. And I have all the answers, right? And you think, yeah, good for you. That's exactly that kind of emotional connection. Now, I don't have a very strong visceral connection because I like the way I look. I'm coasting a lot on my past fitness, as most of us do. And I'm thinking, okay, there are days, you're right, when I don't want to train. And what I do then, I pull a trick on myself. I think of myself as a warrior. You think, okay, whatever kind of warrior. I mean, sometimes I'm Batman, but sometimes I'm not, right? I'm a gladiator. So you think, okay, what do those people do? And the moment you do that, this is what happens. It takes you out of your head. You stop feeling weak and tired. It's there, but it's in the background. And in your mind, those people are remorseless, right? They just put in their work like machines. And you think, okay, and you get going. And once you get going in the groove, well, you're in the groove, right? And then you start doing it. So that's one of the things that I do. And the other thing is I have a backup plan. So if, for example, there are days when for whatever reason, my plan is not going to work, I'm just too tired to physically do it, especially when I have heavy bug work and I've done other things and the day's stressful and I know I'm not going to be able to do this. And I say, okay, I'm not going to do heavy bug work today, but I'm going to get on a treadmill. I'm going to put on a Netflix movie and I'm going to walk for 2 hours. So that's there. So I'll still do something. And usually what happens, I walk for 2 hours and I'm exhausted by it by the end of it. By then, of course, I feel like doing heavy bug work, but it's not feasible anymore. So, I've been training till midnight. So I go to bed and the next day I feel very different about it. So it's having this awareness that we are all going to fail at some point. It doesn't matter how smart we are. It doesn't matter how clever our plan and our discipline, unless we have, like Usyk, this is the plan, here's the team, here's the coach, here's the psychologist, here's the chef, all those things which basically are layers of subtle pressure to keep you in what you're doing, to keep you focused. Unless you have all those things in place, it's just you and your thoughts. Okay, so at some point, they become so overwhelming and you think, oh, I'm tired, it's just late and I've got so many things to do. And sometimes you just dishearten, the smallest thing about the outside world, the external world, can really take the wind out of our sails. And then nothing seems worth fighting for. Everything seems, to be without purpose and without meaning, and that kind of destroys us. Okay, so when we have those days, we should think, okay, first of all, it's natural. It's going to happen. As you said, we're human and we're alone most of the time. So then second, you think, okay, what's my fallback plan? And for me, I put on a movie, I catch up on my viewing, I'll walk for 2 hours. In 2 hours, I do between 12 and 15,000 steps, depending on my walking speed. So it's about 12K. And that's a good win. Or if I have energy in the tank, I take myself elsewhere. I become somebody else. So the problems I face in that particular moment suddenly seem to recede. And in my mind, I'm this. And I can put on some music on my speaker, or on my headphones, which will really get me fired up. And that's it, I'm off to the races. These are mental tricks which I developed for myself because I don't have the pressure of competing anymore, which used to keep me on the grind. It's not there. So if I say, oh, I can take a week off, there's nobody to say you shouldn't. I know I shouldn't, so I never do. But it's there, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of, I mean, I don't know if it is or it isn't, but it's a bit like the DILTS model, isn't it? Kind of, who do you want to be? You describe who you want to be, and then you describe what that like not you now, but who you're going to be in the future, and what that person does every day, and then you just start doing that. And it sounds simple, obviously, it's not as simple as that. But I kind of do that. I've adapted it a bit, but that's what I do, and it sounds similar to what you said. So, like, I mean, you've said lots there. What you were talking about motivation in the beginning, I think of like when you go shopping in a supermarket. If you go to a supermarket and you haven't got a list and you don't know what you're going to have for dinner and you're hungry, you're going to buy loads and you're going to eat it all. Whereas if you take a list, you know what you're going to have for dinner, you don't got to have for breakfast tomorrow and all that. You'll go down with your list, you'll buy the stuff and get out, and it'll take you 10 minutes as opposed to an hour walking around buying and coming back with a tube of Pringles and some donuts or something. So that's the kind of, it's having the recipe for success, isn't it? I suppose.
Yes, it's a great example you said, because
sorry,
I was going to say it's a great example you just given. Absolutely brilliant, because if you have a list, you have a specific image of what you're going to do in mind already, and you're focused on that. And if you don't, your attention will go to whatever, and the emotional response will be sort of visceral. So if you see donuts, you think, oh, I don't mind eating some donuts. You're going to buy a couple. If you see something sweet or a bottle of wine, all those things which you shouldn't be buying, you'll buy them. So yeah, that's a brilliant example.
You're right as well, because I don't even notice those things in the supermarket. I just don't notice them because I'm not looking for them. I'm looking for I'll go specifically what I want and I get out of there. But the other thing as well, because so James was saying, like, we're away. We met each other in Scotland, but I was on a holiday in Scotland, so I was walking up and down mountains, and we did 3 days in a row because we were in Aviemore and there's lots of mountains around there. And I was like, while we're here, I want to use that time, because when we leave, we're not going to be around these mountains and I want to walk up and down them. But I was also trying to train in between as well, because I was just keeping it going. But I had to pare back the training to do the walking, because I was walking for like 6 hours. So I did what I could. And then at the end of it, I just stopped because I was like, well, I've got to walk. That's my motivation at the moment. That's my goal. But that was for 4 days. And then when we come back, we'll have the weekend, and then I'm back into training again. So it's kind of just looking at it and saying, right, well, what's my focus right now? What's important to me in the short term? And does that stop doing what I'm going to do in the long term? No, it's just a little thing along the way, because this is my focus. And then with the post that you put out earlier, and I love that, because we talk about that on this all the time, about living till you're 100. It's kind of like, well, what does that person do? What does the 100-year-old person, what did they do 30 years ago, 40 years ago? And I think about that all the time now. And like some days, obviously, you go and have a beer and you go and do this and that. And it's like, well, that person wouldn't have done that. And it's like, yeah, but if you do it every day, you don't get there, do you? But if you do it every now and then, it doesn't matter. So no, I'm just sorry. I've gone off on one there, but I'm just kind of, it's making me think about everything that I've just done and everything that I'm going to do in the future. Because that is, like I say, it reminded me of the DILTS model. And like, because you just mentioned, like, today I'm going to be Batman. And it's like, what would Batman do? And he'd get up and he wouldn't stay in bed, watch the telly or anything like that. He'd go out and do something, wouldn't he? So yeah, it's really
exactly.
Really cool.
He's highly motivated. Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
And you're right. You see that those two studies I put out a link to today essentially looked at people who lived at up to 100 years old. And they examined to see how is it that they reached that age. And what they found is that consistently, they made small positive choices, which led to better health outcomes in every decade of their life. And the result of that is that as they aged from 20 to 30 to 40 to 50 to reach to 100, they experienced either very few or zero significant health problems. They didn't have high blood pressure, didn't have diabetes or pro-diabetes, they didn't have any sort of heart issues, no mini strokes, any of those things. And the difference between those who reached 85, because there are also some people in that group, and those who reached 100, that's a 15-year difference, is that those people who reached 85 actually experienced some of those things. And those people who did not reach 85 experienced a lot more of those things. And it's not just I experienced it and overcame it. I think what happens every time our system experiences something which is potentially life-threatening, stroke, heart disease, high blood pressure, any of those things. I think it basically stresses the system, but at the same time, it allows it to accumulate a number of tiny errors, and those errors accumulate. So as we get older and those errors accumulate, at 20 and 30 and 40, they're not debilitating. At 50, 60, and 70, they begin to become evident, and now we are malfunctioning. Our functionality is impaired, which then makes it really difficult to get to 90 and 100. But if you don't have those small errors, then 90 and 100 becomes feasible.
I was having a conversation earlier in the gym, and there was a lady whose daughter, I think, is involved in medicine in some way. I'm not sure, but I was talking to this lady who's about 60. Her daughter is about 30, say, and the daughter had said that the decade of the 60s, when you're in your 60s, they call it Sniper Alley, and I'd not heard this before, but they said because that decade is where the majority of people start getting these things going wrong with them. In that decade, that alley, that Sniper Alley, is when you start getting picked off by you maybe get cancer, you get you have a heart attack, you start having heart disease, hypertension, all these things. And in that decade, so I suppose the people who are getting to certainly the people who are getting to 100, but the people who are maybe getting to 85, they're getting through that Sniper Alley, that 60s, which is kind of this, I suppose it's just in our society, and with the kind of life expectancy, that sort of 60s decade is like the most kind of, I suppose, dangerous one for people. But as she said, I think it's not necessarily there's anything wrong with the 60s. It's the stuff that you've been doing in your 30s and your 40s and your 50s that then accumulates and shows up and leads to these difficulties in the 60s. So
there's an additional element to this, and you're absolutely right. And thank you so much for bringing it up. There are studies that have been looking at metabolic rate and how metabolism changes. And there was a study which was absolutely massive. I think, and I can't remember the number of individuals involved, but it was well over 200,000. And they looked at different age groups and how the metabolic rate changes, because we had the assumption that as you age, metabolism slows down, so you put weight on, become a little bit slower, and then that sort of goes on throughout your life. And this is what they found. They're going from 0 to 1 in that first year of life. That fetus has double the metabolic rate of any adult. So that fetus is burning up fuel at that young boy. From 0, at the moment you're born, to the first year of life, you're burning up energy at a tremendous rate. And from 1 to 20, for the next 19 years, it begins to slow down a little bit. And then from 20 to 60, it's steady. There's no change, like zero change. And this is, again, counterintuitive. You're thinking, oh, I'm 30 now. I'm not my 20, so I'm 40 now. I'm not the same as when I was 20. But from a mitochondrial point of view, the engines that run our cells, the metabolic rate is the same. So what's changed is our own ability to move our body, which then has de-strengthened us, which has made it harder. And then what do? If we don't think about it, we adapt our lifestyle to become more sedentary, so we don't have to move. And then we put weight on, then we get aches and pains, and we think, oh, my metabolism is slowing down. No, it's not. Between 20 and 60, from a cellular point of view, at a mitochondrial level, you're the same person. And then when we get the so-called Sniper Alley, from 60 to 70, that's when, in that 10-year period, you begin to get significant changes to your metabolic rate. So now, provided you do nothing, right? Because obviously, exercise is an intervention. If we work out hard, if we do HIIT, which is high intensity interval training, for example, we know that it has a direct effect on the mitochondrial makeup of our cells. So it takes us back in years. So if you're 60 and you do, I don't know, once a week in a high intensity interval training workout, From a biological point of view, yes, you're not going to be 60. You're going to be a lot younger, which means it's going to express itself in better health outcomes, more resistance to disease, more resilience to external factors which stress us out, a better feeling in how we move our body and how we then feel about ourselves, which is our identity, which then that sort of affects everything else in our lifestyle. So that's the critical age. And then from 70 to 100, metabolism again, sure, it slows down, but it slows down incrementally. So the big change is there. And that's when all those things creep in, because if your metabolism slows down, it means basically your immune system is not as powerful, you're not burning up as many, you haven't got as much energy to begin with, you're not moving as much. And if you haven't taken care of yourself, then at age 60 to 70, you begin to age rapidly. And what's more, you begin to feel it. And this is a feedback loop, right? We're going to a spiral. Where you feel old, you act old. You act old, you begin to age faster. And, you know, sort of, it takes a downward turn.
Well, I think this will be really interesting in 50 years' time or something, because people are getting to 100 now, born in 1925, right? So by the time you get to the 70s and 80s, they're 60. And then into the 90s, they're 70. And before all that, all of that wasn't there. And people ate, like, I mean, they lived through the war and stuff, but they ate single ingredient food and made their meals and all of that sort of stuff. And then it's only in the last 30 or 40 years, isn't it, when it's like hyper processed food and delivery and all of that sort of stuff. So how many people live to 100 now, and how many people will live to 100 in the future? So in 50 years' time, or even 100 years' time, how many people will be 100 years old, and why? And will it be because of medical intervention and because kept alive? Because we talked about this with Dr. Nancy Allen, didn't we, about lifespan and health span and all, like, things like that. So you can be healthy up until you're 60 and then you can live till you're 100 unhealthily, or you could be healthy until you're 90 and drop dead, which is better, you know. So I just find that interesting, because it's obviously everything's changed in the last 40 years, or there's a lot of things have changed, and there's a lot of things coming back about, you know, fat's not bad for you, you know, all of this sort of stuff. Like, you know, people are like, go low carb, go high carb, give this up, give that up, and it's there's so many different diets and everything, and it's like it's a bit more simple than that, isn't it? It's just you know, prioritize protein. You know,
you're right.
Eat the right amount of calories.
You're absolutely right. And okay, first of all, it's fascinating what you just said, because statistically, in any kind of population, some people will live longer than others. As populations increase, we're going to get that statistical number also increasing in terms of real numbers, even though the statistical number remains the same. Sorry, but we are also becoming more aware of what we need to do. And one of the classic things, you know, if you look at actors in the 70s and 80s, 70s primarily, if you look at James Bond film actors, and they had, you know, from our perspective, pretty much, you know, they were wealthy, they had kind of access to pretty much anything. They look old, you know, they're in their 40s, and they look like they're 50 or 60. And you think, you know, what's wrong with them? Well, nothing is wrong with them. We are just aging slowly. So we're aging more slowly because of our knowledge. And you said, you know, things are simple until they're not. You know, should you eat carbs? Should you eat fat? Should you go keto? You know, should you whatever? Okay, it comes down always to that energy conservation system. If you're stressing a system out, you know, if you're going from diet to diet, then you're basically creating problems for yourself, because you're creating constant stress for no reason. And if we think of an ideal scenario where a person is born on day one and lives 150 years later, right? And they die at age 150, no significant health problems. And I mentioned 150 because, you know, modern science thinks, you know, that's the upper limit of our age group, right? That ideal person, this is what they've experienced. They've never really experienced any significant stress factors that have taken their internal balance off kilter. Sure, they had up and downs. You know, you get stressed, you distress, right? You like, you know, you lift weights, you exercise, then you go home and take a deep breath and, you know, have a glass of water, and you feel so much better. So this kind of situation is fine. So basically, you're creating that kind of baseline. If we manage to have the baseline always, then it doesn't matter what we do, we will have the same positive health outcome. It doesn't matter if you have a high-fat diet or a low-fat diet or whatever. If it's not stressing your system out, then you're fine. It doesn't matter if you exercise or not exercise, if you're walking or if you're doing an everyday high-intensity workouts. If you're pushing yourself to the limit, you're burning out, then you're going to have health problems. There are people who are super fit, but they're not healthy, right? I have to say this. So fitness and health are two different things.
Whenever they interview people on TV who've reached 100 and what have you, and they're like either at home or they're in a home or whatever, and they're like, what's the secret? What is the secret to living a long life? And they never have anything profound to say, do they? They just go, oh, well, like I'll have a whiskey a day, smoke the odd cigar at Christmas and all that. I've just lived till I'm 100, but they always seem quite relaxed. They never seem straight,
yes.
like, and it's like, I've said that before on these podcasts. It's like they seem to have had like a life where they just say, I'll just go with the flow and see where it takes me and all that, and don't get stressed. And whether that's true or not, I don't know. But that seems to be like a running theme. Yeah.
I think that those people are naturally resilient. In any kind of population, we're going to get always, again, statistically, some people who are naturally strong, some people who are naturally fast, some people who are naturally resilient. And resilience essentially is the brain's and body's ability to bounce back from any kind of external stressor. And we're not talking about exercise now. We're talking about things which we don't control. I don't know, perhaps loss in the family, losing your job, whatever. Those things which basically really, really stress us out. If you can't manage that, then you're basically accumulating chronic stress problems down the line. And if you can manage it, it doesn't matter how stressful your life appears from an external point of view. And you mentioned people in the war, right? I mean, I can't imagine anything worse than that. You're living at a time when bombs are falling down around you, and the landscape you lived in is changing and people are dying. It's just crazy. And yet that generation seems to have been really, really resilient. And there are a couple of factors in that. First of all, I think the people who weren't probably didn't make it. So we get survivor's bias. But also the people who did make it were forced to adapt mentally and psychologically. And they learned how to navigate life better than us because they lived through that massive stressor. And that we can see then in very positive health outcomes. Their health span and their lifespan is exceptional. They lived in their late 80s and 90s. They were really fruitful and productive. They were fit and they were mentally healthy. And that's amazing. And you think, how is that possible? These people almost starved during the war. They were almost killed. Some of them were in concentration camps and they made it through that. And you think, how did they get through that and reach that health outcome when they experienced what to us appears a life-shortening stressor? And I think it came down to that. They developed the ability for their system to basically always remain on an even keel. And that's the key to it.
I think I was talking. I'm in another. This isn't a group, but I'm in a group, a small group of people who we talk every week, and it's about building business and stuff like that. But one of the guys in there has had cancer, and it's come back. He's in his late 50s, I think. He's beaten it before, but it's come back again. And when we're talking about stuff, I think about him. I think about my dad, who died of cancer when he was 65, but he smoked his whole life and everything. But I think about and I think if I'm trying to build a business, and if I'm trying to even talking on this podcast and doing things like this, it's like and reaching out to people, asking them to come on, but being a bit scared to ask someone or whatever. I just go, it's not the end of the world. If they say no, they say no. And I've started to get to the point of making lots of decisions that scare me, but I'm just like, I'm going to do it anyway. I think James is really good at this for getting guests on the podcast, by the way. He just sends out messages to anybody. It's brilliant. Not anybody, but he targets people who will be like, we'll never get them on. And then he's like, well, I've sent them a message. But I just find it brilliant because I'm like, if I don't do that, and I'm nearly 50 now, so if I live till I'm 100, that's another 50 years. And if I don't do it, I'll get nowhere. So get over the fear of it and just do it, because if I get cancer and die next week, it doesn't matter, and it's been an amazing mind shift for me that, and this is where all of the stuff you've been talking about, the motivation, the willpower, having a list of things to do, it all just becomes much easier because you get an idea of where you're going. And then you're like, right, I'm not going to stop until I get somewhere close, which I never will, because the bar will keep raising, or the goal will keep moving forwards the further and further you get. And like after, skimming through your book before the Built to Last before the first podcast, and then like watching you on podcasts and actually having speaking to you, like that's kind of been what you've been doing all the way through anyway. Just like, I'm going to do what I want to do and then see where it takes me and then do the next thing. So that's why, like, you shared something the other day, David, and it was it's you talking technology on with a bunch of people on a round table and all that.
That's right.
So,
Yeah.
you know lots
Yeah.
of things about lots of things because you've just said I'm going to go and do it, and I love it. It's brilliant.
It's you're right. It's scary. This is what I realized, and I realized that relatively young, 35. All the stress we feel, everything. Sure, there are things that come at us from outside, but it's from the inside. It's your fear of failing or appearing to fail, your fear of losing status, your fear of people are going to think you're dumb, or people are going to think you're crazy, or whatever it is, right? It's in your head. And then you got to say, okay, what's important to me? And I mentioned 35 because my dad died near that time, and I had to rethink a lot of things. And for me, it was like, okay, he died relatively young. He was 64. And I thought, okay, what is it so important to me? I left a high-powered job I had, and I sort of launched into things which I didn't know a lot about, and I had to learn fast. But it was exciting, and I thought, that makes me feel good. And if something makes me feel good, it doesn't matter how far I will go for it, because it's a bit like an adventure. It's like a walk, right? You can see, oh, there's a beautiful scenery at the end of that mountain or behind that mountain. Sure, knowing about that, but if you don't experience it, if you don't even try to get there, what's the point of knowing about it? So I sort of apply that principle to pretty much anything I do. And yeah, I always feel uncertain, I always feel scared. I'm about to change my writing style and do something different. And I thought, oh, this is stupid. People are used to me doing this. And I thought, so I know my reasons for doing it. It makes sense to me. And I'll do it anyway. And if it fails, it fails. If it doesn't, so be it. It's great.
And if you don't do it, you won't find out.
Well,
So,
exactly. This is the
yeah.
point, isn't it? Life is really short, even though we tend to be amongst the longest living mammals on the planet. And because it's short, I think it's, the worst thing you can do is live with regrets, because then you're failing yourself. And you're saying, it's like and I can't remember the exact lyrics now from Meatloaf, a kiss is a terrible thing to waste. He says, the most powerful words are, what if I had done this, or what if I had tried that? And I think that's right? Or it could have been me, right? Well, how would you know if it's going to be you or not if you don't try? So try always and understand your own reasons. That's how you find yourself. You find yourself through doing things.
Yeah, this is brilliant. Yeah, that is great, David. That really, and it's interesting. You said it's so true, isn't it? That like you say, people use the word. We've spoken about this on the podcast before, where the word stress is used so much now. And when I was growing up, 30, 40 years ago, certainly stress, anxiety weren't really words that were used. I know we use the word a lot now. But it's also, but people use the word like that is stressing me out, or this is stressing me out. But it's kind of stress, like you said, it's something doesn't stress you. It's your reaction to something that has happened that is in many ways probably what was there? Someone said, there's no good news, there's no bad news, there's just news. And your the way you decipher and process the news and all your beliefs and values and all the rest of it decide what's good and bad news. So it's interesting because I find myself as well, sometimes I can get myself very stressed around certain things, and other times exactly the same things wouldn't have that same impact. So it's kind of how you manage your own internal processes, isn't it? I mean, that's probably one of the greatest. If someone could work out how to do that consistently, which you may have done, I don't know, but how you can stay on an even keel, and because sometimes things come at you and you can deal with them brilliantly. But I suppose that's part of resilience, isn't it? That's another word you've used, resilience today. Can you maybe talk about that for a minute, because that would be really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, resilience we build up, and this is how we build it up. Essentially, I mean, let's think what resilience is. The definition says it's the ability to bounce back from an external factor that's actually stressing us out and pressing us, psychologically, neurologically, etc. But really what it is having the margin, having the capacity to absorb a knock. So if you are running the kind of life, if you're living the kind of life where every day you're operating at the very limit of your capacity, you're constantly stressed out about things, you're constantly chasing targets, you're constantly thinking you're failing, you're constantly behind, you start the day with, running because you think that's what you have to do. Then when something goes awry, and something isn't going according to plan, it's really going to destroy you. You haven't got the capacity to deal with that. But let's say you're on holiday, right? You're on holiday and you have to take a train to get somewhere to see a site. You say, what time is the train? It's 11 o'clock. You show up at the station 11 o'clock, but because you're in a foreign country and trains run a bit late, 20 past 11, 11:30, you've been waiting for half an hour. Is it a big deal? No, nothing. Okay, missing half an hour in Britain or the States in a normal day, it's like the sky is falling. Okay, first of all, you feel bad, then you're blaming the government, you're blaming the country, you're blaming the company, you're trying to see where is the customer service officer, you can lodge a complaint, and you're calling all your meetings and say, I'm running late, this, that, and the other. You're stressed through the roof. But you're on holiday, you have this capacity. And if you plan the kind of life which gives you the capacity, you're pretty much coasting anything. So if you're saying, okay, and this is how do you do it practically? Because we're talking about theory, but this is how I do it. I pretty much plan my morning in the start of my morning. I know what to wear because I wear the same things every day. And for me, I only have black and white in my wardrobe. So that doesn't stress me out, right? So then I know that I'm going to train within a certain time in the morning. And if I don't do that, I have a backup plan. So that doesn't stress me out. I'm going to start the day with a coffee and catching up with the news, and I'm going to talk to my wife. So it's an even keel. I'm not going to chase emails. I'm not going to check, even though I could. There are emails coming in, I need to answer them. And I'm going to deal with them after 12. Because after 12, that's, I'll sit down, I'll answer emails. And that's my method of dealing with everything. So when something happens now, the day goes wrong, okay, I'm going to catch up with everything. It's not going to kill me. First of all, I've already started in a calm way. And secondly, okay, I'm going to chase up things now, but I know I'm going to go back home, I control my environment, it's going to be fine. So that's how I build my own resilience. So that's the margin we build up. But there are other things within that. It's like, okay, how do you deal with immediate stress? So something happens. And sure enough, there's an emotional response. Perhaps somebody's yelling at you, perhaps your boss is telling you, perhaps you will be fired. All those things which, stress us out immediately. And you can't help it. There's a visceral connection to that, an emotional response. Your heart rate goes up, cortisol levels go up, your stress levels go through the roof, your brain begins to shut down, and you can't think about anything. Panic sets in. And this is the body feeling a threat and preparing for action. Now, the thing is that in a normal 3,000-year-old environment, we'll be taking that action, right? So we're gearing up for action, all those things are happening, and now they're basically going to be activated, and they're going to get used up, all those chemicals, and then because we're going to run, we're going to fight, or we're going to do something active, and then we return back to that homeostatic baseline we were talking about earlier. It doesn't happen now. So what do? Well, if you take a really deep breath and hold it, and you take another tiny little breath as you're holding that, so now you're full and then slowly exhale, you're doing the same thing. You're using the connection of the vagus nerve with your stomach and your brain to activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which brings down that emotional response. The brain brings down your cortisol levels and your all the neurochemicals which have activated you. And now you begin to think clearly. And we know from studies that if you panic, if you feel a threat, this is what happens. Your body gears up for action. And the first thing it does is it shuts down all the high analytical centers of the brain because they're energy intensive. So you can't really analyze the problem in front of you, even though now it's cerebral what you have to do. And you can't see a solution. And because you can't see a solution, you feel the walls closing in, panic sets in, everything becomes worse. But if you take a deep breath and you decompress, then the brain begins to kick in. Looking at the same landscape, you can navigate it differently. You'll make a different response, you'll reach different decisions, you can have different outcomes. And if you do that consistently, I mean, at the end of the day, all we need is good decisions every day. On average, we take 1,600 decisions a day. So if we're to take, I don't know, 85% of those are really brilliant. They're good and they accumulate day after day. I think you're going to end up having an amazing life. So that's the goal on a practical level.
That's so interesting. And I think that you used the word a couple of times there, control. And that really kind of resonated with me. But I think that having the ability or margin to absorb a knock. But the way you mentioned, the way you explained your morning, and I think that's the thing. You're very in control of your morning, and it's very intentional, you know. And I think that sometimes when things become stressful, or you allow things to become stressful, it's when you don't feel in control of your life almost, you know, and then things pile on one thing after another, and like you say, you're then operating at max capacity and you don't have any more room for any more stuff. So I love, that, I mean, you sitting in that lovely crisp room there describing your morning and the coffee and it just sounds like I think that's a perfect.
I think my heart rate's just dropped.
Yes, I feel really. But it's
Thank
amazing,
you.
like you say, because I just went from a very, very 2 weeks on holiday with my family, zero stress, really lovely, and then you come back to, and I did a video the other day for my members about, because lots of people, similar to me, that's why I did the video, I was speaking to other people, then trying to get back into a routine of, you know, everyday life. It's that kind of culture shock again, almost, even just 2 weeks out of it, coming back to it can be really jarring for people. So but I think although the things that you kind of highlighted there, the importance of routine and control and being intentional, and I suppose also controlling your inputs, aren't you? You're like you said, I'm controlling what is taking my attention and what I'm allowing into my brain. I'm not opening emails, I'm not going through social media, I'm not, you're controlling what your focus is and what you allow in, which is really, really, really powerful, I think.
I'm glad you mentioned control, because this is another fundamental aspect of who we are. In order for the body to survive, and the brain and body are two sort of enmeshed, integrated systems, the brain tries to do the impossible, right? It tries to predict the next moment. And it does it through a variety of factors. We have large, massively large brains, really complex, because they process all the information, trying to predict what's going to come next. And the idea is that if you know what's coming next, then you're prepared for it. You can navigate your way through it safely. And that's what the body is designed to do. All that is trying to control the world, which is impossible. But we try in every possible way. And I'll give you a couple of examples, and I'll bring it back to what you said and show the practicalities of it. Let's take somebody who's absolutely constantly pleasant to everybody. And he's in what we would call a people pleaser sometimes within psychological circles. And you think, the emotional response to anything is to be nice and polite. And you think, oh, they're nice and polite, and surely they can't have any stress in their life, and have amazing stress inside their head. And that emotional response, where they're nice and polite to everybody, is their way of controlling another person's outcome, because we get into the reciprocal behavior. So if I don't know you, for example, and I think you might be a potential threat, maybe you'll yell at me, maybe you'll beat me up, I don't know. In my head is that, right? I'm going to try and be really nice to you. You're going to feel socially obliged to be nice back to me. I've controlled the situation now. I've significantly lessened the possibility that we might have an altercation. So constantly we have these thoughts in our head, and people sort of always confuse control with controlling. Controlling is the kind of behavior where we try to basically manage everything, and it's going to drive us nuts. We're going to go crazy because we're constantly stressed out and constantly reacting, and sometimes overreacting. But control, on the other hand, is that it's basically understanding where the limits of what you can do lie, making sure that you have that intentionality in everything you have, and then making sure that your responses are your responses, not somebody else's, the reaction somebody else elicits from you. So if, for example, I'm nice to you and you think I'm a complete douchebag, you don't have to be nice back, but you're polite. So then I don't control you. But if I do control you because you haven't thought about it, then it doesn't matter if I'm a douchebag or not. You're going to be nice back, and now it makes it even harder for you to say, hey, David, you're a total douchebag, because you were nice. And I'll say, what changed? So now suddenly I make you feel really bad, right? And I'm controlling you with my stupid sort of nice behavior. So it's very important to understand that everything we do in our life, absolutely everything, is about control. And we need that control in order to feel homeostatically safe. So we don't feel constantly stressed all the time. And the problem we have in modern society is that it's so complex right now. We have so many inputs coming in from everywhere that it's very difficult to switch off, and it's very difficult to focus, and it's very difficult to understand where the boundaries lie. It has to be intentional. We build it up from the inside out, starting from our thoughts and our responses and our reactions, our understanding of who we are and what's important to us, and then going on into our immediate environment. And these are the layers we put in place. And if we put those layers in place, essentially we are within limits of in control of our situation. It makes us also instantly more resilient. So we build it up through those practical actions. You start the morning. So, and I have a friend. This is how he's going to start his morning. He sets the alarm, and he's going to ignore it for 10 minutes. And then he's going to leap out of bed and try and hit the shower running. And I told him once, why don't you use those 10 minutes to do, I don't know, 10 push-ups and have a coffee? And he's promised to try it. Okay. But he's highly strung. This is the thing, and I understand that. And he's highly strung because he lives in a constant state of anxiety and constant state of arousal. So when his day starts like that, it's impossible for it to be good because he doesn't feel in control of anything. He's going to hit the traffic late. He's going to go through the traffic. He's going to yell at everybody in his mind or externalize it. Worse, as he gets to work, and he's going to get to work, and already he's worked up. So it's impossible for him to have a good day. But that's self-created. Suppose those 10 minutes where you're going to stay in bed, trying to sleep in, which aren't working, your brain is already functioning. It's already counting the minutes. Get out of bed. It doesn't matter how tired you are. Do something you actually control. Have a cup of coffee. Have a shower at leisure. Get dressed, listening to a tune. And then do the rest of the things. And it's changed your entire day, just those 10 minutes. That sense of control of your life. So these are things we need to manufacture. And they're not easy, I understand that. But if we don't, then it's not our life. It's what's happening outside, and we're just constantly reacting to stuff.
That's the paradox for most people, because that used to be me. I'd have to start work at 7:30 in the morning, so I'd have to leave the house at 6:50 and drive for 40 minutes. So I'd get up at like 6:30 and have 20 minutes to get in the shower, get dressed, all of those things, leave the house, get in the car. And sometimes it would take longer and what have you. And so by the time I got to work, I was wound up. And then everything was stressful at work because of that. Whereas if I'd got up at 5:30, which to me at the time would have been like, that's far too early because I don't sleep very well, I would be too tired. But then actually you save your energy, don't you? You then you can get to sleep at night, and you can get up at 5:30 to leave the house, to go for a half-hour walk or do whatever, like you said, a bit of meditation or whatever it is. And then the day would run more smoothly. So I've said that before. People tend to maximize their time. They even spoke about this. There's a guy called Rory Sutherland speaks about it with train times. When they try and make trains faster between two places, what people tend to do is then move further away. So if they live half an hour from work by the train, but they make the train 20 minutes, they'll move 10 minutes further away. And so all they're doing is maximizing that time that they're stressed, basically, so they can stay in bed for an extra 10 minutes or whatever. And it's just, to me now, that is absolutely crazy. But at the time, because I was sitting behind a desk for long hours during the day, I was like, I want to be here as little as possible. So therefore I'm going to leave the house as late as possible to get there, which is just so I understand it now, and it's so counterintuitive. But when you're in it, it's kind of like it just becomes a thing that you do, and then you don't get any time to think about how to get out of that because you're constantly in it. And I really empathize with people who are in that situation, because like you get to the weekend and you're kind of like, I'd
drained.
There's
You're
nothing
drained.
I can do about it, but I'm not going to think about it over the weekend because it's work, and I'll worry about it on Monday. But then you get out of bed 10 minutes before you got to leave the house, then you're back in it again, and then all of a sudden, you're 10 years older.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree with you. And far too many of us are caught up in this, right? With no exceptions. I used to have, that kind of life almost. What used to save me is the fact that I'd have to get out of bed and do 5K every day. So, that kind of saved me a lot. But that's because of, of my own sort of attachment to exercise. Now, what I will say to everybody is find something which is yours. Start the day with something which you own. It might be listening to, I don't know, a bit of music. It might just, doing nothing, looking outside the window at whatever's outside your window. It might be taking 5 extra minutes having a shower at a leisurely pace. That little bit of space which you own gives you a sense of control of your life. And that's physical, right? Which has an emotional aspect, which has a psychological counterpoint. And that's how you actually build up from those small things into the bigger ones. That's how you become the person who's not overreactive. That's how you become the person who's plan-orientated, goal-orientated, and intentional in their life. How do you start? You start with that. Say, I'm going to have 10 minutes in the morning. That's my space. Nothing gets into that. And stick to it. And then when you come out of that space, you're a different person.
Totally.
I love that. Find something that's yours first thing every morning for 5 minutes. Something that's a real actionable, and it could be, like I say, it could be reading, couldn't it? Or whatever, exercise. Yeah, I love it. Coffee outside in the garden or something. Just it's a totally different start to the day, isn't it? Than jumping out of bed.
It can't be catching up on social media because that is not yours, right? Social media is an external input that elicits a reaction. So it is not ours. We don't control that. So it has to be something you control.
Yeah.
What I like with things like that, and I've done this, I don't do it at the minute, but I might do it again in the future, is books like The War of Art or the Tao Te Ching or the Daily Stoic or whatever, which are like 1-page chapters of just little insights. And then you get up and read them in the morning, and then you're like, right, I'm ready for the rest of the day. And they're just really cool because they're all like, they're sort of not necessarily self-help books, but they're just kind of like reminders of like especially The War of Art, of how resistance tries to stop you every morning, so you've got to beat it every single day because while you've been asleep, it's been doing push-ups overnight. So you get up in the morning, you read a chapter of that, which takes like 3 minutes, and then you're ready to go. And I love stuff like that.
And I'd probably say as well, would you say, David, as well, not watching the news in the morning for the first 5 minutes you wake up, that's similar to the social media, isn't it? I suppose it
is. We need to understand that our brain is actually a machine that needs information to function. We thrive on rumors for that reason. We thrive on gossip for that reason. Gossip actually has a significant and key role in our social structures because that's how information travels. And social media plays that role and more than that. And so do the news now because they come from all different sides. It's not just one news report. So that information needs to be processed and it will elicit a reaction. It doesn't give us a sense that we control the world. So we need to find something which actually is ours. And like I said, you can sit down and just do nothing for 10 minutes. That's a luxury for most people. Put a timer there and just sit down and do nothing. Just stare at the wall if you want. But 10 minutes and nobody can move you from that time. It's your space. And just that little act gives you a sense of empowerment, which then changes us. It leads to a cascade of other events internally. Our neurochemical structure, our neurochemical cocktail changes. Our cell structure changes as a result of that. Our hormonal profile changes. The way we will step out of the house changes. And then we'll find ourselves being able to react differently, which gives us a further sense of empowerment. And then that sort of builds and builds and builds. And that tiny little thing is really, really important.
That's fantastic. I think we'll start to wrap up there, Dave. That is a great call to action that hopefully all listeners, including and myself, and I think that's brilliant. I think it's just one of those things, isn't it? You can take away and do, and everybody here must be able to find 5 to 10 minutes in the morning And if you can't, you need to find it even more. It's like, what's that? There's a saying, isn't there? Something like, you know, you have to be able to do 10 minutes. And if you can't find 10 minutes, you've got to find 20 minutes because
yeah. If you can't find 5 minutes to meditate, you need to do half an hour.
yeah. That was it. Brilliant. So David, where would you like people to find out more about you? Where would you like them to come to follow you? I mean, obviously, like I said at the start, if you haven't listened to episode 243 with David, then go back and listen to that. But in terms of your social media channels, YouTube, your books, what's the best place for people to go?
Well, probably the easiest is to find me on my website at davidamerland.com. And all my socials are there. But if you Google me, my socials come up. And I usually spread things everywhere. So I make it easy for people to access.
Yeah, excellent. So davidamerland.com, okay,
he is. I can attest for this because I haven't used LinkedIn for ages, right? Like ages. And I went on to LinkedIn this week and set my profile up differently for doing walk and solves. And I'm already connected to David and I didn't even know. He's everywhere.
I've been starting to get back onto LinkedIn a bit more. I need to do that more. That's one I shelved for a while, but I think it's really important now for the kind of conversations we're having and the kind of people that we're meeting. I think LinkedIn
definitely
is important. But thank you so much, David. I mean, that is absolutely brilliant. I'm sure we will speak again in the future because I love these conversations. We like I say, we basically started and I said, right, what should we talk about today? And we've kind of had a lovely conversation that's really covered a lot of ground there. But I love that. Find something that's yours first thing every morning for 5 to 10 minutes. And that's how you start and that word control, how you start to control your morning with intent. But thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Peter Lant. It was lovely to catch up with you again as well.
It was. Thank you. Yeah, it's been great. Happy birthday for yesterday, James.
Thank you. Yeah. And everybody, thank you for watching, for listening. Like I said, that is our first episode in our 6th year of weekly podcasts, and that was a great one to kick it off with David. So thank you all of you for watching, for listening. Please do like, share, subscribe, leave a review if you're watching or listening on a platform that allows you to do so, especially on Apple Podcasts is where we want to get the reviews in. We will see you next week. I think we've got Chris Beetham on next week with us for episode 262. Thank you, David. Enjoy the rest of your day. That was brilliant.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
I'd love to come back and thank you for this. It was absolutely fantastic conversation.
Brilliant. We will speak to you again soon. So until next week, guys, we will see you then. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Health Odyssey with Peter Lant and James St. Pierre. To get your regular fix of hype-free health, you can subscribe and leave a review wherever you get your favorite podcasts. You can find out more on today's and other topics at healthodyssey.com or find us on Facebook or Instagram by searching for Health Odyssey.